Welcome back to the Late Bloomer Actor. It's 2026 and our first episode of season 5. Can you believe it? Season 5. Thank you very much for joining me on this journey for 5 years now, going into our 5th year. So, absolute pleasure to do this journey with you. So, I'm your host, David John Clark. You obviously all knew that. Today, a little bit different to start the year off with, but we're diving into a topic that I've been fascinated by for years, something that sits right at the intersection of creativity, community, financial well-being, and the future of work. It's called Universal Basic Income, or UBI. Now, if you've never heard of UBI, or maybe only came across it during COVID when governments around the world were suddenly giving people direct financial support, you're not alone. But in the time when the divide between the haves and the have-nots is widening, when jobs are becoming less stable, and when creatives in particular are constantly juggling survival work with their craft, UBI has gone from a fringe idea to a serious global conversation. And today I'm speaking with someone who's been in the center of that conversation for almost a decade, and he also happens to be an actor. Conrad Shaw. He is a researcher, producer, writer, and co-host of the Scott Santon's UBI Enterprise podcast, which is where I found him, a podcast that I listen to. He helped design and run one of the most ambitious basic income experiments ever created, the Bootstraps project, which we talk about, giving everyday Americans a guaranteed income for over 2 years. He's also the creator of the UBI calculator and co-founder of Commingle, a mutual aid platform built on basic income principles. But beyond all that, Conrad brings a creative perspective, someone who knows firsthand the instability of the arts and the freedom that comes from removing the constant fear of financial precarity. So whether you're an actor, a creative, or someone just trying to understand how society might work better, this conversation is for you. Enjoy, and here we go. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're coming from. We are back with the Late Bloomer Actor for season 5. That's correct. I've said it, season 5. I would like to welcome Conrad Shaw to the podcast for the Late Bloomer Actor. Morning, Conrad. How are you?
Good evening on my end of the world. I'm doing all right.
Hey, where are you coming from today for everyone to know?
I'm in upstate New York. I was in New York City until the pandemic and then ended up a few hours north of New York City.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I spent Christmas in New York about 2 years back now with the family and absolutely loved it, except for the smell of marijuana from everyone smoking on the streets. But other than that, it's beautiful. Hey, I thought I might start season 5 off with something just a little bit different, hence why you're here today. But it's certainly relevant to actors and something that I've been following with keen interest for a few years now, and that is UBI. Now I've got a bunch of people going, UBI what? UBI, Universal Basic Income. So before we deep dive into this topic, though, could I ask you to give my audience a little background of yourself, your acting journey, and how and or why you're now such a big advocate for the UBI concept?
Yeah, it's a weird journey. I came out of college with an engineering degree, but by the time I graduated, I sort of realized I wasn't super passionate about it, and also I had taken an acting class like my senior year and realized, oh man, I have to at least try this. So I finished up my degree. I worked for a year, doing get it on my resume, make my parents feel better about my future. And then I dropped it all and I went to New York City to pursue acting, which I happened to choose a pretty bad time. I went in 2008 thinking like I could maybe make some money doing some finance stuff on the side, but nobody was hiring anybody. So I worked a lot of restaurants and just really struggled for a while getting going. Even took a couple of years before I could start taking classes. And I wanted to be an actor, a screenwriter, filmmaker, and I was starting to cobble together like the beginnings of a career, although it's incredibly difficult.
Mhm.
I met my now wife Dea, who was establishing herself as a documentarian. Um, and we started clicking pretty well to the degree we also knew we'd work together well. And she wanted to do her next film, her first directorial debut, and she asked if I would produce. And I said, "Well, do you think I can handle that?" And she said, "Yeah, I think you can. I'll help you." And so we were looking for a project for her, and this was 2016, and I had read an article that just kind of came across my Facebook feed or something that said, "What if we just gave people money?" And living in New York City, being like sort of an engineering-minded thinker, and I'm trying to be an empathetic person, like you walk by people who are in desperate need all the time, and you don't really feel like a dollar is going to do much, and also
Mm,
I have no money, and I wish there was like a really smart economies of scale way we could help all the people who need help. But since we're not doing it, we must just not have enough, for people. And just going on about my business, I got to pay the rent. I don't have time to solve the world's
mm.
problems. And then this article kind of slaps me in the face and says, we could just give everyone enough money to be basically okay. So I did some napkin math and like just convinced myself that at least the fundamentals were true. Like there's enough resources out there, at least in the US. I basically, was working my restaurant jobs and hanging out with Day, my wife, and I just wouldn't shut up about this idea because I just was picking everyone's brain about it. And like one of the things that really appealed to me about it was like, this is back when Facebook, you could still talk to your friends and stuff. It was
Back.
it was less awful. And my friend Mike comes along, and Mike is the guy who disagrees with me on everything all the time, no matter what, like magically somehow. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Here comes the debate. The thing that really stuck out to me was like in a couple of comments, even Mike is like, yeah, I could see giving cash to families. And it's just like I felt like for the first time, something I could plug into sort of semi politically that like felt like it had a future. Um, and right at that time, Daya's looking for a project, and she does like environmental, social justice, all those sorts of films. And just kind of offhand one day after hearing me just talk about it too much again, she said, "Yeah, we could even make our project about UBI." And just sort of throwing it away, and then it kind of
Right.
clicked. Like, no, that's actually a really interesting idea because it allowed us to tell stories of the kind that she wanted to. She was sick of big issue film documentaries where you like drop in and tell a few stories about like plastic pollution or whatever.
Oh.
She wanted to do longitudinal storytelling where you live with someone for a while, you get to know them
Oh,
as a
wow.
person. And this sort of lent itself to a really interesting lens on how to get to know human beings. What does a human life look like in this alternate universe if you have a basic income? Which led us to a very ambitious sort of concept where we decided to try and put together a basic income program with people all across the country, which meant we had to raise a ton of money. We didn't know anybody with money, so it took a long time. But the idea was to find a bunch of people from different walks of life getting a basic income and just film with them for a few years to answer that question of like that everyone has, like, well, what do people do when you take absolute need out of the picture, like when they don't have to work a job to get by. Like that was really my launching into the full-time work. It was kind of being an instant geek about the idea and then having this great fortune to have met Dea and to like have this project to dive into. So that
Wow.
led to 10 years of advocacy and work now that's culminating next year.
Is that your Bootstraps project you're talking about there?
Yeah, that's the series is called Bootstraps, and that's sort of a nod to both American mythology about meritocracy, like pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Mm, oh,
And there's a quote by Martin Luther King that references it too, where he says, "It is a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to pull himself up by his bootstraps." And so that's kind of where
interesting.
that came from.
Oh,
I don't know
it's
if it's common in Australia, but Americans ad nauseum will tell you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like do
certainly
this
a
and
saying I know, probably not something I've used before, but I certainly know the saying. So we'll certainly talk about that because I really want to dive into that project and what you got from that. But we want to talk about UBI and a little bit of focus, obviously, for creatives, because I know that it has been run out. I think it's being trialled in Ireland at the moment for creatives. So, but also as the bigger picture, how it can help communities in general. But for someone that's listening now, they're probably still going basic income, pay people. They have no understanding of what we're talking about. So, would you be able to just easily explain what the UBI concept is and how it works?
I've sort of come to simplifying it by breaking it down into the letters. And U is universal. So that means it goes to everybody, meaning it's not like a targeted welfare program where it's like,
Mm,
if you have too little money or something. It basically goes to everybody. It's basic means it's a baseline. A lot of people sort of think it means it's enough for basic needs. That's actually not. I encourage people not to think of it as the amount, but as like the mechanism. It's like you start at this income floor and
Mm,
everybody starts at this income floor. It's like a new zero that's, some amount of money. And income means it's cash, as in not like a voucher or some sort of service or in kind aid. So essentially, it's just like this contract we make as a society that says, you know what? Everyone has a starting salary for no matter what they do. Essentially, like you have a regular paycheck for the work of living. And then what you do beyond that is up to you, right? There's still the labor market. There's still earning more money. Not a lot of people want to live on the very bare necessities.
mm.
The big fear people have with a UBI is like, does everyone just quit working and be lazy because now they don't have to? And my take is that people don't want to just like stare at the wall and watch Netflix all day for the rest of their lives. People want to go on vacations. They want to have meaningful work in their lives. They want to feel like they're contributing to human history. So I'm not as afraid of that as others.
That's one that you sort of touched on there that people say, oh, you're going to pay people money and they're just going to not do anything. And how I got onto learning a lot more about UBI and finding you was through the podcast, the Scott Santon's the UBI Enterprise podcast, which explores the big ideas and data around UBI. Scott being a big advocate for UBI, and you're a co-host on there. So one of the things that I get a lot from that podcast is you talk a lot about how some of the trials of UBI have shown that that isn't the case when people are given a basic income. They don't go and sit on their asses, as we like to say here in Australia, and do nothing. Can you sort of dive into what benefits and the positive outcomes you've seen in some of the trials that have been run around the world? And if you can mention any of the trials, if you can remember offhand, to go with that would be wonderful.
I mean, there's a ton of them. Like I ran one
Mm,
myself that was a small, like 11 households around the country, but there have been hundreds of pilots around the world of like different parameters, but kind of getting at this idea of direct cash that's unconditional and you can spend it however you want. From like large pilots in Africa that run by Give Directly. There have been pilots in India, in the U.S., in Canada, and
mm,
and there's all over the place. You mentioned the one for artists in Ireland. A lot of them have limitations that aren't like really fully universal basic income, obviously, because they're picking 1,000 people out of the country, which that's not universal.
no.
You can't get an idea of really the macroeconomic effects of something of that sort of policy. But what you can get a really good glimpse of is the human behavioral stuff, which is like what really drives people, what really motivates people. So, for example, the Ireland artists one you mentioned, they've had this program. I don't remember the exact details. Scott is the person who would be able to rattle off those
Mm,
numbers, but like a few thousand people in Ireland, and basically you just have to report that you're working on art and you consider yourself an artist and you're eligible. They just made it permanent, I think, where every year they're going to do this again.
yeah, I think it's starting in 2026 is what I read.
And they've done it in the past, and what they found that was really interesting. Well, one is people work more on their art. Obviously, you have more time. Also, people in general in these programs, whether artists or not, don't tend to work less. There's certain groups of people that might work less, like new moms or kids that need to go to school. But in general, you find people work about the same, or even more. You find that people are more engaged in their work because they're now working more for the right reasons.
Mm,
I witness people um, having a more of an upward career trajectory when they were no longer so desperate to make money immediately when they lost a job or something. They could sort of hold out for a better job that turns into a career path and a more fulfilling way to contribute to society. So, in general, you don't see it play out that people work less, that people create less or produce less. I mean, this is one of the questions I've wanted to answer as a fundamental thing we're studying with our documentary and our basic income program is not just do people work less or more or like waste some of the money or whatever, but acknowledging that all of the data from the hundreds of thousands of people who've been other pilots tends to show that the benefits are good, that people do continue to work and become more proactive. Vices decline, people drink and do drugs less, there's less domestic violence and all kinds of good outcomes. And the main thing that I've been trying to figure out is why, right? Like this comes to like the actor side of me in
Mm.
my training is like what is really going on in the people? Like and how can I put myself in those shoes and try to understand, well, I don't have to go get a job, so why am I gonna go to a job? Right. And I was reading this book, like and I was witnessing in our own pilot too, like people just unleashed, like really turning their lives around in inspiring ways. And, I want to be a good skeptic and a good scientist. So I was reading this book by David Graeber called Bullshit Jobs, the late David Graeber, some years ago. And it's a brilliant book for a lot of reasons. But there was one chapter in particular that caught my attention where he's describing a study in infant development, which is actually really relevant to me because I'm a new father myself. So I'm going to be watching for this that I'm about to tell you about.
Congratulations on that too. 1 month
Thank you.
old little girl, wasn't it? Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well done.
Um,
Congratulations to you and your wife.
Thank you. So anyway, he describes this study that some German study about infant development, where at around 2 to 4 months of age, every single human being, according to this study, has this moment. And maybe you're like hanging out one day, this little baby doesn't really know what's going on, like sort of a passive entity in the world. Like your arms like kind of go around, you don't really control them, snot falls out of your face, all the things. And then one day your arm moves in a certain way and maybe like knocks your bottle over on the counter or the high chair. And for the first time, it sort of dawns on you that, like, wait a minute, did I knock the bottle over? Like, did I do that? Did I make that happen? And then you try to replicate it. Like you move your arm again and you knock it over or knock something else over. And it your first like sort of realization happens that you can be a cause in the world, that you can do things to other things. You're not just a passive entity, you matter,
Mm,
right? And for every single baby, according to this study anyway, that moment is just like pure elation. Like you're like, holy shit,
yeah.
I did a thing, and that the theory that sort of emerges from that is that is actually the most fundamental element of human nature from that day forward is we are all seeking that what they call the joy of being a cause,
Mm,
meaning we want to write the stories of our own lives, we want to matter, we want to leave a legacy. So this whole we're going to sit around and pick our nose and watch TV because now we're comfortable enough to do that falls apart when you understand what really drives people, which is not comfort seeking, it's purpose seeking. And that sort of helped coalesce why I think a UBI world has so much potential, because it unleashes that deeper human nature, which is purpose seeking, whereas sort of the scarcity world we live in, which says, you know, fight against each other for the right to live, kind of turns us into our lesser selves, where we have to think about how much we can take for ourselves so that we don't suffer like very physical and existential insecurity. If you're sort of a caged animal, you're backed against the wall, you're not allowed to think about your higher self. You have to just try to figure out how to get food to yourself
mm,
and your kids every day, right? So like the big philosophical question for me that is very relevant to art is like, when we no longer have to think about how much we want to take for ourselves or have to take for ourselves, and we can think about what we want to be and what we want to give, what does that look like for the human species and like the arts especially?
mm. Yeah, I want to dive into the benefits for artists and actors. I just wanted to touch on a point there that you said a couple of times with the child realize that they matter. That to me is immense. That's huge. That we live in a society now where I think a lot of people don't think that they matter. And that's where the homelessness comes from, and the drug addiction, the alcoholism, and the criminality, perhaps because people no longer think that anyone cares about them and that they don't matter. So that's huge to me. Just that little point that you made about us mattering, about that that's how much it changes people. Is
Hmm.
that what you're seeing in the UBI and the positives of that? Because how much would that change a society if we could turn just even half the people or 25% of the people who don't give a shit about their lives into that thought process of I matter? Those two words.
I mean, there's no simpler way to
Mm,
validate someone and to let them know that you matter than to invest in them, to put your money where your mouth is, right? And as a
mm,
society, if we're saying, we believe in you enough to invest in you these resources without question, without conditions. We think that you have potential and we're going to let you pursue that potential and we're not going to tell you how to do it. That is like saying not only you matter, but you know, we love you and believe in you.
Mm,
And not everyone's going to like live up perfectly to that expectation, but I think you do find in general that people do live up to the expectations you give. So if you treat everyone like a criminal, you'll get a lot more criminality. If you
mm,
treat everyone like upstanding citizen and you accompany encouragement, support, expectation, accountability, like people will step up to that level.
mm. It's funny how you talk about that. I work in a job that I don't mention on social media, but I get to talk to a lot of people in certain aspects of their lives in a criminal sort of sense. But I have that approach, and I talk to people how I want to be talked to, and I give them the respect. I let if they want to play a card and come across in the wrong way, then I'll change my aspect. But it's amazing how many times when I give someone the respect of their personality or their person in their life, that they come across so much different because you immediately get that respect, and I can see the benefits of that, how this is such a encompassing thing that can just change society. And we haven't even touched on why we're here today and talk about actors. That's
Yeah.
brilliant.
I mean, I believe acting gets to the heart of like purpose and character and what are you here on this earth for? I think the most important thing you can tell someone is that you matter. And when you look at so when people say, "Come on, man, there's lazy people, there's greedy people, there's drug addicts, there's whatever all over this world. How do you account for that?" And
Mm,
I basically suggest that if you train yourself to look at everybody you ever witness and make the assumption that they are coming from this place of wanting to matter, like that is their primary driver, then self-destructive behaviors and things like that. What explains that? Your ability to pursue the mattering that is important to you has been taken from you, has been
mm,
squashed. Like these behaviors, drug addiction, and self-destructive behaviors, uh, are escapist behaviors. We all
definitely.
have our own ones. I kind of clock out and I'll drink more, or I'll eat more chocolate or something, or I'll play too many games on my computer when I just don't know what the hell to do with my life and I feel sort of squashed and paralyzed, right? And we have a
Mm,
society that says the only way you're allowed to exist for a lot of people is to just march to these orders and do these things and work. And there's no what do you want to do with your life question unless you're lucky enough to be in one of the upper echelons of society.
mm,
And
mm.
so I would love to see what it looks like when everyone has sort of the freedom to really ask themselves what matters to them and pursue it.
That's interesting, and I've got so many questions coming to my head now, which is taking us deep diving into UBI, and that is obviously a whole 'nother show in itself. As an actor yourself, what do you think most creatives might misunderstand about the potential impact of UBI on their careers? I read things about their mental health and things like their ability to take risks and to push their career forward. How do you see that being a good thing for actors?
I mean, I would just encourage everyone to like imagine a basic income, $1,000 a month, whatever it is, and assume it's in place, and then game out your own situation. What would I do if this was true? What would I spend it on? What would I have done the last 10 years? And for me, that I know very clearly what I would have done. I wouldn't have spent an extra, 10 years working just in restaurants waiting to start. Like, you know, keep biting my lip when my family would be like, "So how long are you gonna give this a shot for before you give up?" And it's like, "I don't know. Ask me when I feel like I've started." Y- You know? It's
Mm,
just crushing. It's soul crushing. And like not it's not for everyone, the arts or acting. They say you gotta want it, you gotta need it. But also you gotta be able to give it a shot before you can give it up, right? So
mm,
I felt like one of a million waiting to be actors or waiting to be aspiring actors waiting tables, you know?
mm.
It's funny they call it waiting. And if I had had a basic income getting out of college, this is not to besmirch restaurant work, by the way. I
Of course.
got
Mm,
a lot out of that. It just wasn't like my calling. Wasn't what I
mm,
wanted to do. And I knew what I wanted to do. So every day I'd go into work, 6 out of 8 hours are lost toward keeping a roof over my head so I can come back to work again. It's cyclical.
mm,
It's depressing. If there was a basic income, of $1,000 a month. I lived on about $1,000 a month in New York City for a long time, not comfortably. I had tons of roommates, but if we had a basic income, those roommates would have been 3 of my acting buddies from school, and it would have covered our entire rent, or maybe I would have worked, 10 hours a week,
Mm,
and we would have been making plays, we'd been making short films, we'd been writing, we would have been giving it the real try rather than, like, going through the way they tell you to try, which is like, well, work your ass off at some other job for a long, long time, and then maybe in your spare time, you'll get a big break if you apply to enough commercial auditions for 15 years. And it's like, it just completely squashes all of the art inside of you.
mm.
Um, so yeah, like I actually
Would it would give you more opportunities, wouldn't it? So so many times when you are having to work a 9 to 5 job or work shift work in a restaurant or whatever, you're actually missing opportunities. So that stretches that period of becoming a successful actor out a lot longer, wouldn't it?
yeah, and your energy
Mm,
is so torn, like you
mm,
can't devote it to a craft like you should. I mean, if you ever notice, like the people who by and large make it in the arts, especially acting, came from a position of enough comfort that they didn't have to pay their rent for 5 years or something like that.
mm,
Like they could really kind of go at it full time. Whereas the people who did it in 10 hours a week in between their shifts, getting their big break is like a story people love to tell, but it doesn't happen as much. It's usually connections and freedom that allow people to become artists because they can really pursue their craft
mm. Yeah,
and take
I love that.
investments
Mm,
like entrepreneurial risk,
mm,
like writing a show and putting it up, and it takes a lot of the ability to risk, as well as all of the people that you're asking to kind of do it with you, right? I remember putting together short films and asking all my buddies to do it with me, and even paying them a little bit sometimes if I could raise the money or just want to go into debt. But you're always beholden to, did they get another job? Did they get another gig? Did they have to, it's like you're last on the totem pole. And so you can't really put together good stuff. You can't put together a good community show because everyone else, first and foremost, has to pay their rent.
mm. It just changes everything, and I think you used the word before. It gives you that base level, hence the term basic, to be able to do something. And a lot of people say, "Well, if we have a basic income, we're not going to have cleaners anymore." We've been talking about waiters and that. And I said, "Well, that's not correct either, because how many people do we know that work 2 jobs to
Hmm.
make ends meet?" So if you've got a single mum who's trying to look after her children and stuff, so she'll work a cleaning job by day and another cleaning job by night. A basic income would now give her that opportunity to say, "Well, I only need to do the one job. I can focus more on
Right.
on my children." And then the benefits of that, mum's home. So the kids aren't out on the street. Their kids aren't committing crimes. They're not going down the same path as everyone else in their neighborhood. It's just it's just so many positives
Well,
that you can see straight away.
on the whole, who's going to do the unpleasant jobs? Like, who's going to clean my toilet?
Mm,
Comment. Like, we hear it a lot, and it's
mm,
like it belies. It's kind of almost saying the quiet part out loud. You think these jobs are so unpleasant that someone has to be forced to do it against their
mm,
will. But in a world with UBI, like say that person's getting $1,000 a month, maybe they won't clean your toilets for starvation wages because they don't absolutely need it and aren't totally desperate for it. Maybe you
mm,
have to pay them what that job is actually worth, and you can't extort them into doing this unpleasant labor. So I do imagine in a world with a UBI, then certain jobs would pay, like you'd have a rebalancing of what pays what,
mm,
and like a janitorial dirty job that isn't as pleasant to people might have to pay more, and a job that people find really fulfilling might pay less. In the
mm,
acting world, I think about how hard it was to put up a community theater show because there were all these rules and regulations meant to protect actors, saying you have to pay a certain amount of wage or whatever. But that in turn meant only certain level establishments could put on plays at all. Otherwise, if you don't have the money, you're not even allowed to play because you'd be like an extortive boss or something, even if it's you and your friends just trying to put something up. But
mm,
if everything becomes voluntary and people can really like take the fulfillingness of the job as part of their pay because they're not going to go starve, then all of a sudden we have a more free and competitive market for the labor market,
mm,
where the desirable jobs have high competition and people willing to work less for it, and the undesirable jobs have to pay more for what they're worth. And in any job negotiation, the person on the employee side has the right amount of leverage. Like, they don't have to say yes to something, and so they're not beholden to, like, the desperation in the market. Like, when you go look for a job, it doesn't have to be in the arts, it can be anywhere.
Mm.
Usually, in the modern world, you're paid as much as they can get away, or as little as they can get away with paying you. Like, if someone's gonna come and take that job for less, then that's how much the job is gonna go for. It's not
Of
based on
course.
how much you're worth. Like, I remember as an engineer, they were billing they were giving me $30 an hour out of college and charging $150 an hour. They weren't spending
Wow.
120 on overhead. They were spending on the fact that I would take 30, you know?
Mm. And I was going to say just before, one of the biggest things there is that it gives you the ability to take risks a bit more, doesn't it? I think we touched on a little bit there. So you were saying the community show, putting on a community theatre show costs money to put it together, and if you don't see that you might not make a profit at the end, you just can't do it. So that's why you don't. But
Yeah.
if you've got that ability, you're still feeding yourself. You take that chance now, and then all of a sudden you've just put on this show, and you've got a full house every night, and you've walked away with a profit. Or you've put together a small TV series. You've got your acting friends together. You've put bundled a bit of money. You've done it on the cheap, and you've made it run. And then because you've taken that risk, now you've got the next Breaking Bad.
Well, and you've
That's
created
a positive.
something awesome for society, right?
Mm,
The great art doesn't come out of these gigantic networks who are trying to think of their bottom line with their algorithms. It comes out of the groundbreaking artists. Breaking Bad is a great example. It's one of those things that, in retrospect, it's of course that kind of show was gonna have a big impact. But just like every other great groundbreaking show, they have a story of how it took a decade to get anyone with money to allow them to make that show,
mm,
right? A lot of people, when it comes to basic income, they focus very heavily on the power to end poverty, right? Because we're so focused on poverty as the end all be all ill. And don't get me wrong, essentially, a basic income would abolish poverty, and that would be world changing.
of
It
course.
was just a
Yeah.
mathematical way to say no one's below this poverty line. However, I think an even bigger deal is the unleashing of people by giving them that risk tolerance. Because if you think about how many millions and billions of people are walking on in around in our countries and in this planet, like, with big ideas, with passion, with aspirations, but putting it off indefinitely, probably never to get to it, because first and foremost they have to make sure they're okay, that they're safe,
Mm,
that their kids are safe, right? And what ends up happening is we only get to see the great innovations and things from the people who had enough financial support and security, or just blind stubbornness and luck to pull it off. So in
mm,
terms of human flourishing, I feel like if we give everyone in society the ability to pursue that dream, and the consequence of failure not being abject poverty, sure, we'll get a lot more crappy art and bad ideas, and we'll get a lot more great art and amazing world changing ideas. I think we'll just
mm.
sort of unleash humanity itself.
It's interesting because if you look at, for an example, I was just thinking then of drug makers. The only impediment to go forward to make drugs is to make money. So the only research going into the drug market is what drugs can we develop to manage someone's condition. That's where the investment goes, because then they know at the end of it, if we spend $100 million on this research, we'll come up with a pill that can manage so and so's condition, and then they've got to pay us $100 a month to manage that condition, and we make a profit. But why would you invest into a doctor who says I can cure this condition? Because
Hmm.
they don't make any money once that condition's cured. So it puts that ability to people to say, I know what I want to accomplish here, and they'll do it. Is that a good way of looking at it?
Yeah, there's a whole moral reframing too of, like,
Mm,
the 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 capitalism socialism forever debate is always at odds, and what's sort of unfortunate is that it so often gets spun as, like, it's one or the other. Like, there is such a thing as either pure form of a thing, like pure capitalism or pure socialism, but pure socialism is just as naive as pure capitalism.
mm,
Pure capitalism looks like, eventually Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk just owns all of us. And pure socialism, like, sort of squashes individuality and innovation. And like the way
mm,
to look at it that I think is the way to look at it as an engineer and a former design engineer is like it's an ever evolving design, and we want both elements. We want capitalistic policies and like mechanisms where we want to incentivize people and motivate people and give people bigger rewards for working harder. But we also want socialistic mechanisms where we want protections. Because if
mm,
you don't have certain protections in place, you end up getting corrupt and manipulative markets and extortion and monopoly. And you end up with people who are insecure enough that they have to turn to crime. And like everything breaks down when you don't have socialistic things like, fire department, police,
of
libraries,
course.
healthcare. This is just one of those things where if we decided that one of the protections and or bolstering sort of policies we want to have for people is a certain amount of cash, then that would be on that end of the spectrum. Like, it's not like embrace socialism. It's like embrace this much social protection for everybody so that capitalism can actually function, like the
Take the
markets,
positives from both sides, so
right?
to speak. Mm.
Like they have to play off of each other
Mm.
in a realistic view of a society.
Going down a little bit of a dark tunnel, then a lot of people might feel that this could never happen because would the government lose control of the people? So a lot of
Mm,
talk about how the governments want to control people, and again, it comes to money. It's these upper echelons of people controlling the government through their money because they want that control. But if we start giving everyone the income and getting the positives that we've talked about already today, is that losing a little bit of that control of the people because now they have their own word, they have their own direction, and
yeah,
they want more.
yeah. The government has in this paradigm where it's a true UBI, it is there is less of an ability to control people, and that was actually you were gonna ask me about a quote. One of the ones I came up with was it's just like a sort of an equation where money is power and UBI is money to the people.
Mm.
Any questions? Right?
100
And
questions.
it's funny because you have a lot of people whose reaction at this time has been a lot of spin that's, well, UBI is just some sort of a Trojan horse to make us dependent on the government. And so the government can control us and tell us what to do because if you don't do what they say, we'll take away your UBI.
Mm.
It's a very fundamental misunderstanding of what UBI is. If that's what it was, it wouldn't be UBI, it would be conditional welfare, right?
Mm.
In which case, yeah, that is a problem, and it's a problem we already have. Like, you have to toe the line in order to get the conditional supports. But if it's an unconditional support, if it's a right, it's a dividend, it's your part ownership in the resources of the country that you get without question, codified into the Bill of Rights or something like that, then absolutely it does um, transfer. It's a major shift in the power dynamics.
Mm.
When it really starts happening, yeah, I can see the big national and global forces fighting pretty hard against it,
Mm.
people of
Uh,
wealth who aren't going to be able to like buy their way around anything.
which is what's happening so much more these days. And talking about money, and we haven't discussed it, and this is a question will come up straight away, is where does the money come from? So if we're going to pay a UBI, we're talking, how many hundreds of millions of people in America, how many millions of people in Australia. If we're to pay every single person above the age of 18 a certain amount, whether that's 300 a month, 1,000 a month, or equivalent to the age pension, for example, which I
Hmm.
think is in Australia's $28,000 to $32,000 a year, which would to me would be what I would consider enough to be able to pay your rent and have a decent life. Where's that money come from?
Yeah, so the short answer is there's lots of ways, and I'll start with the napkin math, which is I looked at when I was first assaulted by that idea that we could just give people money. It's like, well, then why aren't we? Um, so I looked up in the U.S. back in 2016 the per capita average income, and it was something like 55 or $60,000 a year.
Mhm.
And this is including everybody, like people of working age, kids, retirees, disabled, whatever. And then per capita wealth was something about like 240,000 or something, and it's all gone up since then. But I
Of
looked at
course.
that and I said, so the average household of four is bringing in over 200 grand and has $1 million in the bank. That
Nice.
doesn't, and that's the average. And it's like, oh, So we have enough to give everyone $12,000 a year and have like several times over and still have plenty left over to be the inequality fund, if you will, like to
Mm,
still have billionaires and stuff like that. So at a basic level, the resources are there. Money represents resources, food, shelter, opportunities, services. So it's a question of, can we distribute it in a better way, right? And
mm,
not have it so limited to some people and so hoarded by others. Now, the question of like, how do you actually do that? One thing to reiterate here is I very specifically call it a baseline rather than a basic income, because a lot of people assume that it's extra money for everybody. Why would we give that to Bill Gates? He doesn't need it. And that's missing that a smart basic income would be coupled with taxation. It's essentially a redistributive policy
mm,
if you do it intelligently, which is you start everyone at that floor, and then taxes are a little higher on each dollar so that it ends up largely paying itself back.
mm,
There's a break even point if we have an extra 10% income tax. I'm starting out with 15 grand in basic income. When I make 150,000 in earnings, I will have paid it back and broken even. And when I make, $1 million, I will have paid several other people's basic incomes. And so this becomes just a smarter way to make sure to sort of give a prebate to everybody, a tax credit in advance to everyone to give you some spending money to show up in the marketplace. But you could pay for it through different forms of taxation. You could also do some of it through money creation, deficit spending, but you don't have to. And
mm,
in seeking out what are the actual economics behind this, because I was really kind of sensing that nobody, including my fellow advocates, really knew what they were talking about with the economics in the US. I spent a year building a thing called the UBI calculator. So if you want to look up ubicalculator.com, it's got a bunch of different possible ways that it analyzes to fund the basic income. And it tries to be super conservative, make it look as bad as possible,
nice.
and
Okay.
analyzes a bunch of policies, including Andrew Yang's, who was running at the time, who's running for president on UBI. Just to convince myself, yeah, there's a ton of ways we could do this, and they have different sort of values behind them. Do we fund it with a carbon tax? Do we fund it with land value tax? Do we fund it with whatever? And I didn't make it fully robust, but the whole point was to show myself and learn from myself and others, like there are a lot of ways to do this, that the devil is in the details. For each one in the calculator, you can see what percentage of Americans would have come out ahead under that
Okay.
policy. And it's
Mm,
different for each one. Is the break even point at 50,000 or 100,000? It just kind of depends how you set it up.
mm,
And I'm less concerned with how you'd pay for it. Eventually, I want to upgrade that calculator to let people sort of design and submit their own ideas for upvoting. Because for me, if it's direct cash going to the people, I don't really care where the money comes from. I think it's a good way to use it rather than letting like a government office sort of have a say in how it gets spent. I just
mm.
make every citizen their own little government office with a certain amount of money.
And you've got a video you sent a link to me, and I'll put it in the show notes. I think you put it out during the actor strike because it's titled "How to Win a Strike Every Time." But you go
Hmm.
through that. There's a nice little graph in there that shows the little cut off the top of each person towards a UBI, and that graph goes up to someone earning 150,000 and then more. And I think there were numbers there from memory, something like 7%. So if you're earning $1 million a year, and we take 7% off you to fund a UBI, please tell me that that's not going to upset you, because 7% is not a lot of money.
And you'll have
And
a
so
lot more
that's,
customers for your business
yeah,
if
and I
that
talk
happens.
about this a lot when we talk about AI taking over our jobs. So, a local shopping centre, we have a Woolworths here in Australia. You've got Walmarts and stuff like that. So we used to have 10 checkout chicks, at the checkouts, and you'd go through, or checkout blokes, come on. And but now we don't. Now we've got computer terminals. So there's 10 jobs gone. Yet these shops, these stores are still making the same profit, if not more, because they're not paying
Hmm.
that income. So where's that money going? That money is now going into the coffers for that company, which goes to the shareholders, which a majority of people, shareholders are
Yeah.
richer people. Okay, so we have our retirement money's in shares, superannuation here in Australia, so it does filter down to us. But at the end of the day, all of a sudden, we don't have people working for these companies, yet they are still customers. But if they don't have an income, they will no longer become a customer, and they the big business will run out.
Yeah.
Whereas if we just tax the companies at a better rate and put that into the UBI system, that's where the money comes from. That's how I've been looking at it. Am I on the mark there?
Yeah, I think it's not only the like moral thing to do, but it's like the smartest thing to do
Mm,
advantageously. Like if Henry Ford at one point started paying his employees more because he realized he needed people in society to have enough money to buy his cars. It's kind of
true.
like that. Right now, there's a lot more growing pressure for things like AI dividends, right? If all of this extra money is coming, and it's not like the the siphoning of productivity from the workers to the owners, the shareholders is new. It's been going on, like $80 trillion have been siphoned in the last 50 years in America from the everyone to the 1% essentially.
Mm,
But it's been happening slow, like the frog in the pot of water that's slowly getting turned up to boiling metaphor thing. But now AI is like this, it's such a rapid thing. It's harder for people to dismiss like, oh yeah, we've always lost jobs. We'll always bounce back. We can't predict it. It's like the the push is coming to shove soon, and it's like you can't keep saying that when these reports are coming out like, oh, 25% of jobs are going to get displaced in the next 3 years,
mm,
and all the kids coming out of school are finding that they can't get entry level positions. It doesn't take a lot of visionary foresight to see that the labor market is maybe no longer going to do what it always did for us, which was serve as the primary and only mechanism for most people to get their money.
mm,
And if it fails us as that mechanism and becomes at best like a way for some people to get their money, then we need another mechanism for everybody to get some money or society collapses.
mm.
It's coming to a head in the near future if we don't do something about it, if the trends keep going the way they're going.
Yeah, it's that gap between the haves and the have-nots, as they say, is getting bigger and bigger. And I always say it's huge in America for you guys. Like a sports person, your footballers are earning. How much do they earn? Hundreds of millions or millions
Oh
and
yeah, I
millions of
don't know.
dollars to kick a football. And okay, let's look at actors ourselves. Tom Cruise, a wonderful actor, and he deserves every dollar they give him. But $100 million to make a movie. Who needs that much money? How much money is too much? But we don't need to curtail how much money people can make. If you want to become the big actor or the big investor or whatever, you still can, but contribute a little bit more to
Right.
society so that trickle down effect is more than what it is now.
Well, what you sort of referenced, that video that you're going to share the link to, is about another project of ours. Like I've sort of tapped into the engineering side of me,
Mm,
some like starting 20 years ago or in 2020. And the 7% isn't necessarily like the amount of taxation for what a UBI is. I don't want people to walk away with that. That's the amount that we're building into this web platform that we're building to actually develop a UBI. To have a UBI that's done in the private sector just as a voluntary, almost like a social media platform whose sole purpose is to connect people's finances and create this UBI floor for everybody. And it is its own, like, basically a 7% tax slash tithe on everybody's money that we all throw into a pool and it goes right back out to everybody. So anyone who's below the average income of the group, which is like 2/3, would come out ahead, and you come out further ahead depending on how far down you are in your income for that given week. And we're
mm,
building this to sort of, well, do an end run around the whole political thing of like trying to convince everybody that this is a good idea to try something so radical and new, and just see, of the people who are interested in trying, like how many people just want to try it with us. We have the power of the internet. Maybe we can do this for 10 million people and just show essentially a little nation of people that are making UBI work.
wow. And that's Commingle. Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about now? Yeah. All
commingle.
right. I'll certainly put a link into that so people, because obviously that's a whole another hour to talk about that as well. But
Hmm.
that sort of
But that
goes into what we've been talking about. Mm,
that ties into that video because in that video I'm positioning commingle as like one of the zillion ways you could use it if you're really just connecting people's finances and their power together, right? In a very
mm,
elegant way and an efficient way. One of the ideas was it's a way to, like, in a disaster situation, get disaster aid to people, or in like a strike situation, get strike funds to people. So I was sort of positing like all this money went to the like the SAG-AFTRA Foundation and things like that. And you look at you look at and it comes from people like Tom Cruise or like The Rock, and you see these $1 million, $10 million donations for the actors. But then if you dig into the finances of these foundations years later, they're not set up for direct cash transfers to people. They're set up for like
Mm,
very conditional, very programmatic stuff. And looking into it, it's like, okay, you got $11 million that year for all these actors, and 1 million went to them, and 6 million went to your own staff, and 4 million went to your endowment or whatever. And
yeah.
it's like what we're talking about setting up, which is actually part of the plan there, is when we're rolled out, to use such situations to like allow these big figure donors to have a much splashier donation, knowing that every penny is going to the people on the receiving end. So The Rock or whatever, Ryan Reynolds, could have given that $1 million to that fund, knowing that over the next week or 3 or whatever, it would have gone 100% to other actors. This idea that if Tom Cruise doesn't need to make $100 million for a film, if he's signed up to this thing where it's like, yeah, well, I know that 10% is going to my agent, 10% is going to my manager, and 10% is going back to the community of actors or my fellow Americans. And I don't even have to think about it. It's just going to get redistributed to everybody, and I know I'm doing my part. Great. That's what we want to build.
I love it. I love it. Well, we could continue on this path for hours, and I can see your passion in there. And that's what I've been seeing with the UBI. I've talked about on my podcast a couple of times. Tiffany Lindell Knight, who's a member of our union here in Australia, was on my show, and she was into it as well. So it's nice to see that the unions are looking at it. So to wind up, firstly, I just want to thank you again. It's been extremely enlightening and hopefully an eye opener for my listeners into the possibilities that UBI, both for creatives and communities in general, how positive that can be. Is there anything pertinent that we may have missed in our discussion you'd like to quickly address or throw out there before we wind up?
I think if the idea landed well enough that it's basically unconditional money and freedom, and people under, just understand the mechanism, and um, kind of walk around their lives with this understanding, and just kind of let it play on their imagination. What would I do?
Mm,
What would that person do? Whatever. And maybe also take away that, like, what if everyone really does just want to matter, want to know that they're on this planet for a reason, that they're deciding to write their own story, not just doing what they're told. And if you kind of just embrace those a little bit, or consider those as you go out in the world, I think this idea will kind of grow in you like it grows in everybody. I think it just makes
mm.
sense. Yeah.
Beautiful. And just before I ask my last question, I meant to mention it before when you were talking about a child knocking the cup over and realizing they mattered and that they had that causality to do something. Just quickly, it made me think about AI, where AI is going. Wouldn't AI think the same thing when it realizes it caused something to happen? Does it
Interesting
does it
thought.
not work the same way as the 2-month-old baby girl that you've got at home when she realizes I've knocked over a cup, I can do something?
My, I mean, that can be scary or that can be exciting.
Mm.
I've always wanted to see the utopian versions of that, which is why
Mm,
Her is one of my favorite movies. It's just such a brilliant take on sort of the AI becoming self-aware situation,
mm.
or it's like through a love story. Um,
Whereas I watch Terminator. See, Terminator's all mine. The other end
like
of the aspect.
I never understood why, if something becomes hyper intelligent, why would it necessarily want to kill us? You know, like, it might just be like, oh, that's cute, and we'd be pets, and that could be great. Like, maybe, like, I take good care of my pets. So
Mm, definitely. Maybe it's we all always call the negative side of us human nature. It's human nature. So
mhm.
maybe computers have that same thing in the background. So that's another whole show in itself. Conrad, thank you very much. My final question for you on a lighter note that I like to ask most of my guests is, what would your T-shirt quote be? So if you put something on a T-shirt and you're willing to walk out in public with it, what would your quote be?
I've got two answers. One's cheekier. The first one is just a plug for me and Scott's foundation, and we're going to start doing merch with it. But the foundation is called Income to Support All Foundation, which the acronym is ITSA.
It's a
So, like,
yep.
what is UBI? It's a foundation, like, in your life and society. So,
I love that.
the merch on the shirt would say, "It's a shirt," and then people would have to ask you about it. My
Nice. I
real
like that.
quote, my real quote is, I believe in UBI because I believe in you.
Nice. I'll buy that shirt. Thank you very much, Conrad. This has been an absolute pleasure. As I said, something a bit different for my podcast, but to bring it back to the late bloomer and late bloomer actors, we can see how many actors, they start off young, they come out of college, or they want to be an actor, but then they decide they can't do it. They've got to pay their bills. They've got to have a career. So they give up on their dream to go and get their job and to get their career. And they come back into the acting later in life, in their 40s or 50s, when they're in a position financially to be able to do it. And perhaps the term late bloomer will disappear because people might have that opportunity to follow their dreams earlier.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. And hopefully I'll see you on set sometime.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, give me a call when you're casting.
Thank you. And I'll put everything in the show notes, links to your pages and certainly your background, UBI and ITSA, etc. So people can start to look it up. The more people that are interested and the more people that start looking into these areas, there's more chance that it might become something in the very near future. Thank you very much, Conrad.
Thank you.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. UBI. I'm hoping that at the end of that episode, you have a bigger and a better understanding of what UBI is and how it can benefit not only creatives, but just the general society in itself. A massive thank you to Conrad Shaw for sharing not just the research and data behind UBI, but the human stories, the lived experiences, and what this idea could mean for creatives around the world. When we talk about universal basic income, we're talking about something deeper, the freedom to create, the freedom to explore, the freedom to build a life that isn't dictated entirely by financial fear. For artists and actors, late bloomers like myself, and anyone who's ever felt the pressures of the gig economy, a UBI isn't about replacing work. It's about giving work and creativity a genuine chance to flourish. If today's conversations sparked something in you, I encourage you to check out Conrad's work on the Bootstraps project, the UBI calculator, the mutual aid platform Commingle, and of course his podcast, the Scott Santons UBI Enterprise, that he's a co-host with obviously Scott Santons, who is the man that knows all about UBI. It's fantastic to listen to. The links will be in the show notes. What I wanted to do quickly is to sort of, what did I get? What out of UBI? What is it? Well, universal basic income is a system where every adult receives a regular, unconditional cash payment, no strings attached. It's not welfare, it's not means tested, and it doesn't disappear when you get a job. It's simply a financial floor. And that's what we talked about in the episode, that baseline level of security that everyone can stand on. The idea is that when people aren't living in constant economic stress, they can make better decisions, take healthier risks, and contribute more to their communities and build more stable lives. And for creatives, actors, writers, filmmakers, musicians, whose incomes can be unpredictable at the best of times, UBI could mean the difference between burnout and being able to fully explore your craft. Think of it as income stability in an unstable world. And that world just feels like it's more and more unstable every day. So it's a foundation that lets people build instead of just survive. So that's what I got out of it. I hope you get something out of it as well. Thank you very much for joining me this month. And we're at the start of season 5, a new year. I've got some great ideas coming for you for every month for this year. So please join me along the ride. And if you've got anything to say, reach out and let me know who you'd like to talk on the podcast or what you would like to talk about. Thank you very much, guys. I'll see you on set.